Pablo Srugo, what's going on, man? Thanks for being on the podcast. I appreciate you.
What's up, man? Looking forward to it.
I see you got the mate. I have an espresso. Let's cheers. Let's grab mate, I guess, not coffee.
There you go.
For folks not wondering, I don't know if it's not as common in Canada, I would say, right?
You know what's funny, man, is I do this in every single podcast, and no guest has ever actually asked. I'm like, it's the first time I did it. I'm like, man, they're gonna be like, yo, what the fuck is he drinking? They're gonna ask, but no one's ever asked about it. And I'm like, today, I just feel like he's gonna actually ask, and I appreciate you doing that. Yeah, no, it's not as common, but yeah, it's like Argentinian tea. It's a vibe, dude. So
I like it. You drink it out of a metal straw. You can order it actually on Amazon for those who are wondering and even care for it. It's a pretty distinct taste. It's pretty common in Lebanon too, as I was telling Pablo, for those wondering. So enjoying some mate and espresso. For folks who don't know Pablo, Pablo's a longtime friend, both connected in Ottawa. So Pablo's a former founder of two companies, one in the education space. It was a tutoring platform marketplace. He then co-founded this sort of data platform for gyms called Gymtrack, grows it, goes through some ups and downs, which we'll cover here in a little bit, and then really breaks into venture, which I think a lot of us know is not easy to do. Is now and worked his way from associate to partner at Mistral VC, a very, very well-known venture fund, not just in Toronto, in Canada, I would say in the US. They invest in seed, pre-seed companies, different verticals with a bit of concentration in the US. He's a top voice in venture on LinkedIn and just a really cool guy with a very, very strong jawline. We were joking about
which is the key to success. Well, thank you for that intro, man.
the key to success in venture. No, thank you for being. I really, no joke. I know you're a podcaster too. I failed to mention he's also the founder and host of the Product Market Fit Show, a really incredible podcast from one to another. Has had over
Thank you.
100 episodes and really, really a strong show. What I wanted to start off with you, it's very distinct, is maybe not as common of a question, but how does someone, graduate? You graduated from Carleton University. I graduated from Ottawa U, two good schools. And I would say Ottawa is not necessarily, especially back in 2012, wasn't really known for entrepreneurship. I mean, I think Shopify, given their HQ in Ottawa, certainly helped. But back then, when someone says entrepreneurship, it's not synonymous with Ottawa. So how did you break in, and why was that the first thing you do, graduating from Carleton? You end up starting your own business.
Yeah, so funny enough, I was one of those few kids that, for whatever reason, from very early age, knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I wanted, since I was like 10 years old, I wanted to be a lawyer. That was like my thing
Really?
that I just thought, yeah, that was going to be amazing. I just had this like picture, like imagining like suits, you know what I mean? Like this idea, you're in the courtroom, you're like making arguments and whatever, just moving the court, right? And so anyways, I went into Carleton thinking that's what I was going to do. And I took a law class, and it wasn't just the law class. I think started really looking into what that career would be like, and I realized it just wasn't for me. It was going to be very like hierarchical, very like detail oriented, just a lot of things that really weren't going to be a fit. And so all of a sudden, like in first year university, I had this like, okay, like I have no idea what I want to do anymore. And I was like, for so long, for a decade or more, knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I had a friend of mine, Lee, still a very good friend of mine, who was in a similar situation. And I guess we just started talking, and I started just thinking about what sort of things would be interesting. And for whatever reason, business and like being a founder, at that point, it wasn't necessarily tech, right? It was just more like running a business, just
Mm.
spoke to me. The ability to control your own fate, yes, to like potentially make a lot of money, but also to, in theory, not answer to anyone, and just being, just not having any of those constraints just really spoke to me. And so Lee and I, being, young students with that idea that we want to start a business, we started, like thinking about, writing business plans, like thinking about potential businesses. And that kind of pulled us towards that path.
Was my tutor when you guys launched that, maybe even before Gymtrack, was that sort of the launching pad to learning entrepreneurship for you? Was that sort of a test ground, like let's actually explore, and as we go through this, we're going to learn the stages of entrepreneurship? And I guess what did it teach you back then that you just didn't know? Like what was the hardship lesson basically of launching the first venture?
Yeah, that's what it was. And but at that point, we had gone through. There was this at Ottawa U. Actually, he was in Ottawa U. They had this $20,000 business competition, and $20,000 is still a good amount, but back then it was like $1 million. Like it was an insane amount. And so for a while, that's what we were doing, was we would build business plans and apply to this competition, which was supposed to be over the summer. Funny enough, we actually won it. In theory, we won it, but the idea was this company called Chase, and it was the perfect drink to mix with alcohol. So like, we were in that scene, like what did we know other than, going to bars and drinking, right? And so
Exactly.
the idea was like, hey, the epiphany, if you want to call it that, was, man, like people mix these drinks like rum and coke, or like, orange juice and vodka, because like they happen to taste good. But what if you started backwards and started with vodka and said, like, what's the perfect thing you could make that would just pair with vodka? And same thing with every drink. And that was the idea of Chase. And anyways, we actually won it. And then like when the committee looked at it, they're like, there's no way that this is the thing that we're going to get behind. Like our market report was like, alcohol consumption is growing. It's just like, it wasn't going to fly. So anyways, after trying a few of those, we're just getting to the end of fourth year. People
Mhm.
are applying to grad school. They're getting jobs. Like they're figuring out the next steps. And frankly, we have nothing. And the only thing that I had at the time was that I had been a TA for a long time. And then in fourth year, I started tutoring just one-on-one on myself, like freelance, whatever.
Mm.
And so I just went to Lee and I'm like, man, why don't we just, like, all these tutoring companies, which we didn't know how much they were making or not making, but it was like, they're just like, their websites are garbage. Like they just put up flyers and hire like all these tutors. Like, why don't we just do that? And that was all it really took for us to get into my tutor. And I think it was great. It was a great experience. I mean, I think two things that come out of it. One is like there's a huge difference between tech startups, like true startups, and classic services businesses, because classic businesses like tutoring or coffee shop or whatever, you have existing demand that you tap into. And so you will make sales for sure.
Mm.
And you'll probably make them on like day one. Like literally day one, we put up flyers and we got a call for a sale. The flip side is it's very competitive. It's impossible to differentiate, very hard to scale, very hard to grow. And that's another lesson that we learned. It was like, okay, you get going and all of a sudden you're feeling good. And then you realize that it kind of
It
starts to cap
plateaus.
out pretty quickly. That's right. And then you're like, it wasn't clear how we could get it to the next level.
I wonder for you, I mean, both with that, with the tutoring business and the marketplace and Gymtrack, what did you find was the best process to come up with an idea as a founder? Is it sort of led by customers? I know you talk a lot about customers. We'll get to that in a sec because that's more like actual product market fit. But is it more customer generated? Is it, do you believe you can create artificial demand for a product like what we're talking about now? Is it generated from a pain point you discover? Is it consensus based on the market? There's so many different ways you can come up with something, but what do you really believe in?
I think there's as many ways to come up with business as there are like businesses, sort of thing. Like there's I mean, I think at one point I come up with a handful of different ways that you could kind of box a few different pieces in. And I mean, I think what we did was not what you want to do. I mean, we had my tutor running and that would take 5 hours a week and we lived together. So the other like 50, 60 hours, we're just like coming up with random ideas and going out and testing them out. And it's funny. Like one of those ideas, for example, was basically like an Uber Eats or like a Skip the Dishes, which was closer to home at the time. It was
Mhm.
like, hey, why don't we? I'm from Argentina, where even back then, every single restaurant operated their own delivery. Like you could get food delivered from everywhere. And here in Ottawa, it was
On
like
scooters and
Chinese food and yeah, on
yeah.
whatever. Yeah, exactly. Those little mopeds or whatever. And the density is such that, and the cost of labor is such that it made sense. And my grandma would have this fridge with like literally 100 magnets on it. You can get food from anywhere. And here in Ottawa, it was like you can get Chinese food or pizza. Those are the only two places that will deliver to you. So the idea was like, well, if you had this one central player, the density is the problem. So you need this one central player to do delivery for everybody. And this was in like 2012. And funny enough, like, Lee went out and knocked on 10 doors of 10 restaurants. Half of them like wouldn't talk to him. The other half told him to get the hell out of here, sort of thing. Like they had many better things to do. And we ditched the idea. And then, a few years later, like Skip the Dish sells for 200 million, all this stuff happened. So it just gives you a sense of like, if you're coming at it from the outside, it's very hard to figure out what's really going to work and what's not. And so, yeah, you have your classics like, your Toby Luke K's who just, they're solving their own pain point. But then you do have the flip side of like a Jeff Bezos that is very top down and sees, the internet growing and just decides like, from like first principles, what if the internet is going to be huge? What's going to happen? Oh, e-commerce. What's an easy thing to sell? Books. And he starts. So you can come at it, I think, in many different ways. But I would say like that second way is harder and
Mm.
rarer, right? It's like the Elon Musk way, the Jeff Bezos way, very top down. And you do have to sometimes, I mean, Jeff Bezos just hit, but in other cases, like in Elon Musk, like you have to just will it into existence. Very few people can do that. Whereas if you do this combination of either being deep in industry, somehow being at the frontier and or solving your own pain point, you're a little more grounded by the time that you have an idea.
It's very interesting. I mean, speaking of solving, you know, let's say pain points, I know you're a big proponent, and this was sort of one of the many lessons that you learned when you both launched, kept growing Gymtrack, which is, really being extremely diligent and maniacally focused on solving your customer's number one or two problem. I'm kind of curious, like when you go back to Gymtrack, and I know you've posted about this story on LinkedIn, and it's gotten, I don't know, like 8,000 likes. But just walk us through. I'm kind of more so. I want to go back to like your mental state. You're 22 years old when you launched this thing. You guys started accruing some success because you raised a seed fund, 2.5 mil, which doesn't seem like a lot, but guys, this was, back in 2013, 14, Ottawa. I mean, that's still significant, and it definitely was back then. You get into 500 startups, things are looking really good. You're nearing an exit potentially, and then everything goes sideways. And I'm curious for you, how did you manage your mental health through all those ups and downs?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was deadly, man. Like at the beginning, very much this idea that we were just gonna be. I mean, we very much bought into like the VC, unicorn dream,
Hmm.
and nothing wrong with that. But I think the way that we did it led to the wrong things, right? So like we focused a lot on the story, on the pitch, on fundraising, at the expense of solving a real problem in the here and now. That was kind of a high level problem. But in any case, like I mean, yeah, at the beginning, the first year, like from idea to 2.5 million raise, going to 500 startups, in which was in SF, like in the middle of everything from this little, city town, Ottawa, and even in 500 startups, I mean, everything about it was unique in the sense that we didn't even apply. Like Dave McClure met Lee and just told him that he was in. And so 2 days later, we kind of flew down and we were part of the program. And we learned that like 3,000 companies applied from around the globe and only like 20 or 30 got in. We hadn't even applied. And when we started talking to the others about, how much they'd raise, which is often a kind of measuring stick for better or worse, we happen to have been, out of the 30 companies we'd raised, kind of, I think we were top two or top three. So there's all these things that are like, oh my God, this thing is going to be huge.
Mm,
And things kind of keep going that way. But we start facing kind of these diminishing returns in terms of building the product. And it was all about tracking workouts. And so you get to like 70% accuracy easily, and it's very hard to get to 99 point whatever percent you really need. At the same time as that's happening, and the difficulty of making this thing truly work is in our faces more and more, we have this company that is at first wanting to raise our seed, then when we chose a different firm wanting to raise our A, and then that turned into an acquisition discussion. And that went really far. I mean, we had definitive docs. We had a term sheet that we negotiated for months. We signed it.
mm.
We started working on the employment agreement. Those were finalized. Purchase agreement finalized over many months, to the point that I went to my lawyer and I asked him, like, because I just need to ground myself, man. I'm like, I'm only like 24, 25. So I'm, doing all the wrong things. Like I'm spending this money in my head that I don't yet have. And I'm like, dude, like honestly, just like give me a sanity check here. How often do deals get this far and not go through? He's like, I would say 99% of deals that make it this far happen. And so I'm like, okay,
Let's
like I'm
go.
good. You know what I mean? I'm good. And this one was the 1%. Like, it didn't happen. I get that call. It just starts to cool down. You just kind of feel like things are not right. You're not getting the attention you used to get. And all. And at some point, we hopped on a call
What was their
and
main
they
reason?
finally said, like, honestly, it's funny. Like, I think at the end of the day, it was just that this was a weird situation where it's a relatively big company, but the founder still owned like 60% of the company, still made every decision. So it
Mm,
ultimately was his, like, at his whim, right? At his call. And he got really excited when he met us. He got really excited by the story. I think that when the DD team, the engineers came down and saw where the product was really at, they probably came back and said, this thing's really early, do you really want to do it? And I think at some point he kind of decided he didn't want to do it anymore. And that was that. There wasn't like some committee or some board or some process. And so it really was kind of a 0 to 1 event. And they cited whatever they cited because there was a break free negotiated and all these sort of things.
mhm,
But at the end of the day, went from I'm going to be a multimillionaire and the company's going to get funded, and they had manufacturing and distribution and all these things that they're going to help the company with, to we've got to lay off, 2/3 of the staff. And it also just felt like after we did that, the company hadn't failed at that point. We still went on for a couple of years. We had a professional CEO, but everything changed after it. And so it just felt like the air was like sucked out of the balloon. And yeah, I mean, that's one of my biggest lessons, I think, from startups. And you have to kind of live it, I think, to know it, which is you
mm.
really have the highest of highs and you quickly will have like the
The
lowest
lowest.
of lows. And it's at a board level, you don't see these things because you come in and they're like, this quarter we hire these people and this person quit, as an example. And you're like, okay, cool, next slide. And but from the founder's perspective, it's like worked for weeks to like finally get this person to agree to come work for us, and also had this insane fire, this person quitting and like disrupting the roadmap and disrupting a potential rollout with a customer, and like suffer for 3 days, and now like it's just a slide on a deck. Like when you live it,
Mhm.
it's pretty visceral.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, I know you talk about two things. Let's just focus on this for a sec. The sort of emotional roller coaster. I know in your post, the way you put it is you're often one employee, one customer, or one investor away from success or failure. I recently had the episode before this was with Vijay Patel, who, like you, was a former founder, exited his company to Tide, extremely successful exit for him. But I asked him about just like the emotional roller coaster he went on. And he's like, if you really think back to it, my sort of destiny today was really measured on 2 to 3 conversations I had. If those 2 to 3 conversations went a different way, I'd end up in a very different position. Maybe still successful for sure, but it would look very, very different than where I am now. It's like because he sold to Procter and Gamble, and it's like the conversation you have with their corp dev team or the executive team. It's the conversation you have with your board, convincing them. So it's all these small, tiny, micro moments that either go great or either go bad. Except in startups, you're having these micro moments all the time, and so you're dealing with this fluctuation of energy while you have to all run the company, and then you're pitching on stage, and then you go to dinner and you're at an event. And I mean, looking back with all this context, now that you're in a much different state in life and different stage, what do you think about sort of mental maturity looking back? I mean, how do you handle emotional roller coasters now? How do you advise founders to handle them?
I don't know that I'm any like expert on the emotional like side of it. Honestly, I think it's still, you know part of it. Frankly, is it's changed because I'm now at a venture fund. You have a portfolio. You're, as much as VCs may or may not want to admit it, like your highs are not as high and your lows are not as lows. Like a company fails tomorrow, and you might still be like, oh my god, and whatever. But you have 17 other companies, 20 other companies. The founder has none. And same with on an exit, like company X, we just had a company raise a monster round and there was a secondary and all this stuff, and it was great for us. But it is that high is pales in comparison to the high that the founder is feeling when that happens, because his life, actually just changed. So that's actually that's a huge part of it. And I it's funny, I met a founder recently. He's founder of a company that's now like it's a $2 billion company doing over $100 million in ARR called Persona. And he had a very interesting perspective, which was very different. So he said when he started, he quit. He was working at Square, and he left Square after 5 years, started this company, and he said, and I believe him when he said it, like that he just assumed it was going to fail. Like that was actually his status quo. It's just like this company's probably going to fail, and I'll be back at Square like in 6 to 12 months.
Hmm.
And he even told people that he hired, like, listen, like it's gonna be great, it's gonna be fun, but like probably it's not gonna work out. Like most startups don't work out. We probably won't work out either. And there was something to that spoke to me. Like, not to say that if you do that, somehow all your problems go away and somehow the highs don't feel highs and the lows don't feel lows, but it is grounding to have that sort of, to somehow accept the odds. It's like you probably heard this because, we all watch like war documentaries, but like the soldiers that go to war and come back, and something I've heard many of them say is like, there's the people who kind of think about, what they're going to do when they come back or how they're going to come back or these sort of things. And there's the ones that just assume we're already dead.
Mm.
And those somehow like, are more likely to come back, because it just like, you just kind of like ground yourself to the probability adjusted reality, and it just lets you look forward instead of being so anxious all the time. I think there's some, like, again, not a perfect cure, but I think there's some truth to that, to somehow, if you're in that startup game, especially at the beginning, I think it gets like over time things change and you have employees and you can't necessarily think that way. But especially for the highest like risk part, which is that 0 to 1 phase, just saying like, look, like, yeah, like, only 5% or so of companies make it past this phase. So we're probably, probably not going to work out. That doesn't mean you don't do every single thing you can for it to work out, but that might ground you a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the grounding is important. And I know part of your grounding was you talk a lot about, which is odd, I think, because at the same time, you're super ambitious. I know you have a drive, you're proactive, like you have all these great facets. And yet, one of your lessons coming out of Gymtrack was quote unquote lowering your ambition. But I think the way you sort of meant it was not chasing the hype scale. Very difficult to do as a founder, right? I mean, like think about when you raise financing, the first thing you want to do is share the press release. now it's covered by BetaKit or TechCrunch, and now you're on stage and you're getting a bunch of likes, and all of that is like dopamine, right? It's just like hitting your nervous system, and you sort of long for this chase and this validation, and look at me, and very difficult, right, to separate as a founder.
Well, I think, that's another thing I've learned, like talking to a lot of these founders, and even just reading, books on, biographies, whatever. Like, it's very few the founders that go into it and are become successes and originally think I'm going to be like a $10 billion company, right? Like,
Mm,
at the extreme of this would be like if you said to me, yeah, once I have $1 billion, like, here are the things I'm going to get. I'm going to get this island and that plate. I'd be like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, step at a time, right? But somehow with businesses, we've I think there's so we've institutionalized the idea of creating unicorns so much that the idea is you come in at the outset and you need to be able to tell me how this is going to exit for $5 billion. And it's like, listen, you don't even have any customers yet. So how about one step at a time? And that's kind of what I meant by lowering your
mm,
ambitions, especially for first time founders. Like, you're a repeat founder, you've sold a business for $100 million, you're thinking about the next one. You've got like way more ability to fundraise, way bigger ability to hire, the industry well, and you've got less to lose because you've already got this crazy safety net. So yeah, sure, swing for the fences, and that's fine. But you're talking about like a first time founder, and at the outset you're like, here's how I'm going to create a $5 billion company. There's just something inherently wrong to me in there, and you're better off. At least my feeling, having gone through that myself, is to say like, how do I just get to like, how do I create a business, a tech startup that is in theory scalable, but like, how do I get 1 million in revenue, right? Which is already like a pretty big goal, right? It might even be smaller. Like, how do I get a couple customers telling me that they can't live without this?
mm,
Okay, if you have that, you are allowed to think about, how do I get to 1 million in revenue? And then if you have that, you can think about, how do I get to 5? And at some point you might find there's no clear way to get to that next level, and that's fine. But you've created something that has value, and it's like, even at 5 million, with 20% growth and good like lean economics, you can sell it and make real money if you haven't over raised. And if you think this way, you probably won't over raise. You tend to over raise when you believe that this is going to be a $5 billion thing, and so it doesn't really matter. And I just feel like that way of, like, back to mental health, that's probably healthier. It's also, I think, more likely to lead to success.
Talk to me about, I mean, a big part of success for any company is product market fit. I know this is like your bread and butter. At some point, I think you should trademark, this word. I don't know if that's
I
remotely
don't think I
possible.
can.
Unfortunately, but I
I wish
think
I
it,
invented the word. Then
I
that
think,
would really.
yeah, exactly. Nice stream of revenue for you. But I know you really focus on like specifically this segment of entrepreneurship, which is product market fit. Hence why you started this podcast. And I don't know, how many episodes do you have out?
Oh man, I think it's like, we're doing like 2 week now, so I think it's like 150 or so. Like, it does a lot.
Oh
There's a
wow.
lot of episodes now. Yeah, it's crazy.
Love it. Good on you. This would be 168, I think.
Wow,
So
crazy.
167 or 168. Yeah, one of them. Yeah, I appreciate. I know how much work it goes into it. So
It is.
curious, why care so much about product market fit? I mean, I know the importance of it, but out of everything else, right? Revenue, culture, team, value, whatever, the tech. Like, why this specifically for you is the most important that you're focusing on?
I'm just so adamant. Like, I love to simplify things and really try to find, if you think about sensitivity analysis, like, what are those pieces that if you just tweak them a little, everything else gets better. And to me, when I think, and obviously, like, I love 0 to 1, I love early stage, we're a seed stage fund. So this is the stage that I focus in. But when I look at that stage, I'm like, it's just all about product market fit. And I genuinely feel like I mean, nothing else matters if you don't have it, and everything else becomes easier if you do. That doesn't mean nothing else actually matters. It just means if you're going to focus on one thing, this is the thing to focus on, because I've seen amazing teams not get the product market fit, right? So even if you have the best team, if
Mm-hmm.
you don't somehow figure this piece out, it just doesn't matter. Those are resources, and you somehow need to get to that, like, that product market fit in order for those resources to actually be able to drive, true value. So that's really like, that's really the why of it. Is I just think it's not about forecast, it's not about decks, it's not even real. Like, after product market fit, I would say it really is, that next stage is just about people. Like, do you have the right people on the bus doing the right things, is what takes you from product market fit to whatever that next, 10 million ARR, let's say. And yes, obviously people, and we invest in teams predominantly, like, that's one of the biggest things that we look at,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still just an input. The question is, what are you doing to get to product market fit, and how are you kind of like just maniacally focused on that?
Do you or the fund, like, Is there infrastructure or a formula on how you scrutinize PMF when looking at a company? Like, is there a structured approach? I know it's different. Obviously, every company is going to have a different approach, but
I mean, so we invest before product market fit. And so we're looking for what I would say are like leading indicators of future product market fit. I think the main one, I would argue like my two biggest things that I look at when I'm investing are number one, the team. And then number two is the must haveness of the product. Like, do I have strong conviction that this product is truly a no brainer, like must have? And that is, I would say, a precondition for future product market fit. And there's, a lot of that is qualitative, frankly, and it's talking to customers and these sort of things. But that I think is the number one thing. And I've lived that myself. I've seen and even invested in companies that ultimately
mm,
proved to be the case that it wasn't a must have and it was more of a nice to have. But that's a dangerous place for a startup to be in, right? It's like, because I think a lot of things have ROI, and a lot of things you have a story and narrative as to why they're useful, and a lot of things have customers who are happy and are paying. But many of those things are not true must have, and most of those things will get to product market fit.
what is the best way though to understand what is a must have? It's tough for me not to think. I know this is a very weird example, but like just recently, the whole craze around the Labubu, this doll that people attach to their bags. I know this is not tech, it's not startup world, but a good example of like not a critical need and more than 1 billion in sales, I think, right, or something to that. I don't know. It's like $1 billion company now. Is what I saw most recently. Regardless, it's like a fad and everybody's like on top of it, and it's like the craze now. Different. It's a collectible. You can argue different. But how do you actually understand what is a must have? Because that also changes,
I
right?
think, yeah, it does, and I think, I mean, like consumer and B2B are different. I mean, we don't only invest in B2B, but we predominantly invest in B2B. It tends to be most of what we see, and I think in Canada, like most of the stuff happening is B2B. So I think the idea of a must have to a customer, not to say it doesn't matter in consumer, but it is more straightforward and I think more important
Mm-hmm.
in B2B, because you do have these like virality components and like almost word of mouth and like not missing out FOMO pieces that I think matter a lot more in the consumer side.
Mm-hmm.
But on the business side, yeah, you have these like the Sean Ellis test, right? Like what would you feel if you no longer had, this product? But a lot of it comes down to like who is within an organization, who is your ICP, who's actually your buyer, what KPI matters most to them, and do you move that KPI by a significant amount? Those are some of the things that I think are really important. Like the other way to think about it, and there's all thought experiments. Again, there's no like perfect formula for this, but the other thought experiment is like, if you, because there's marketing, how do you get in front of the customer, how do you pitch it, all these sort of things. But if you could get in front of a customer that is your ICP and you told them about what you're doing, would their reaction be, oh, that's cool? Or would their reaction be like, holy shit, I need to see this demo, and if this really works, I'm going to buy it? And then they see the demo and they're like, I can't not have this thing, I have to actually use this thing. That's the kind of thing that I want, right? Like here's an example. Every few months I see an AI that's going to clip videos of long form podcasts. Okay, I haven't bought one yet. Like I've tried a few, I've paid for some. They're not good enough in my
Like
opinion.
Opus Clip is
But
one example.
yeah, like Opus Clip, right?
Mm.
It's a must-have though for a podcaster, and then you could argue, is a market big enough? All these other things, but we're just talking about must-haveness. Like clearly, it's a must-have. Clearly, we all need to be doing shorts. It's a huge growth channel. It's huge for distribution.
Mm-hmm.
So every single time, I saw one this morning that somebody tells me that they've solved the problem, I'm gonna test a demo, and one day one will do it, and I'll buy it. Like that, in my opinion, the output is just not there yet. But in terms of product market fit, in terms of the at least story market fit, I'm gonna take your long form clips. I'm gonna use AI to find the key moments and create short forms. You don't have to do anything. Every single time a new company promises that to me, I have to look at that demo. I can't afford not to, because I know the potential. Like, what's a podcast about? It's all about growth. It's all
Mm.
about reach. I know the potential that could do to reach. So that's my main KPI. So I have to look at it every single time. There's other things people could sell me that I'm not going to look at every single time. And so it's not, you know what I mean? It's not going to have that same kind of must have visceral reaction. I don't know if that's a good example or not, but it's just like it's this morning, and so like that, those are the sort of things that I'm looking for in terms of value prop.
Yeah, I totally understand. I mean, I for sure understand that example as a podcaster. I think it. I mean, this is why it I'm sure helps very much to have been in those shoes. Like in your example, the only way you can have that foresight is either you've done a ton of research, you've talked to a bunch of podcasters, or you're a podcaster yourself, and you have to match that that sort of foresight of where this industry is going and where social media is and how to reach people. Either you have a big social media brand and you understand capturing attention to be able to know that this is where the puck's going, to use like a hockey reference. It's one or the other. Like either you have to have done it or you have to really be in the know through other people and just the industry.
Well, I think that's the other side to it is this is why we're purposefully like opportunistic. So we don't have in terms of how we operate and certainly how I operate. I think there's many different ways to play venture, and I wouldn't even say the one's necessarily better than the other. It's just you have to. It's almost like whatever approach you take has to fit with who you are. So I've tried the idea of saying, "Oh, I think this market's going to go this way, and so I'm going to build a thesis and I'm going to invest in that market," and it just didn't feel natural to me. It really felt like I was one step behind because I'm like, at the end of the day, I can read reports and talk to people and all that stuff, but like I'm not all in and I'm not going to go all in. And so the only person that's going to do that is the founders. So I took the opposite approach, which is I'm going to be purposefully opportunistic. I'm not going to have that many strong opinions about which market is going to go where.
Mm,
I'm just going to have strong opinions about what a great founder and what a great team looks like. That I'm going to have strong opinions on. I'm going to have strong opinions on what I think true value delivery looks like and what must have looks like. And then besides that, I'm going to be quite receptive and quite generalist on purpose. And so as a result, like I'm meeting founders and they're telling me about, this industry and that industry and those industries have like nothing to do with each other. But if they can describe, if they're compelling founders, which a lot of them, frankly, for us, a lot of it is repeat founders and like what have you done before and these sort of things. But first time founders count too.
mm,
And they can describe a clear ICP and a clear problem solution set and a clear insight around that. And I can get to conviction on like, you know what, like the more I think about this, the more I feel like that ICP in that setting can't say no to this thing.
mhm.
Then that might be good. Obviously, then there's still customer calls and stuff like that that go on the other side to just validate it all. But that's how we can get to that level of conviction without, because obviously I haven't, been in most of the industries that I invest in. I haven't been in those industries myself.
Do you ever have I know one of the maybe challenges with being an investor and maybe pivoting now to the fund is sort of having that bias, because sometimes you might, to your point, this is why I think you're broad based, but sometimes you have a bias that makes you miss opportunities that are actual opportunities. I wonder, did you ever come across something like that? Like you'll hear Gary Vee talk about his miss with Uber, I think, investing early with them, even though he knew, the company and management very well. Did you ever have a time where there was a bias, you're like, I'm not sure this is going anywhere, and it turns out to be a hit?
Yeah, I think I mean for sure. There's misses. I'm still early in my investing career. Like it's only been. I mean, I've been here 7 years, but there was associated whatever. Like I've been, let's say, leading my own deal since 2020, right? So 5 years. So the companies that I've missed in haven't had enough time to become absolutely huge, like household names.
Mm,
But I've already missed some that are doing quite well, and so for sure that's already happened, and it's going to happen. And I will also say that it's a lot easier, and I've put a lot of processes, and we as a firm have put a lot of processes in place to not make bad bets. It's a lot
mhm,
easier to put constraints on, investment has to be like this and like that and whatever, and so it excludes things, and that's fine. You reduce your risk of loss, but obviously this game is all about huge wins, outlier wins, and the biggest cost is missing out on a 20x or 30x. You were right there. Funny enough, when we did this analysis, most of the companies that we missed on made it much further in our process than an average opportunity.
mm,
So there was something there that made us look closer, but in our opinion, not enough to pull the trigger, and that was our mistake. And in like, I mean, there's survivorship bias and all this stuff. Like, I would say in all those cases, there was something kind of compelling about the founder, but not clear, like repeat founder sold out business for 100 million, not enough there, but like something compelling, something unique. And there was clear value. But for whatever reason, in some cases, the story they told, this is why I don't care that much about TAM. Like in some cases, the story they told about how big it could get was just not developed, not compelling enough, not ambitious enough.
mm,
And that was a reason for passing. And it's,
interesting.
it's kind of it's a weak signal. Like it's not a non-signal, but it's a weak signal because how much of that is about the true opportunity? How much of that is about the founder's, ability to tell that kind of a story
Hmm.
and just be super confident about it? Like, and how much does that, really matter versus the other signals, which are in front of you, like the team and the value prop.
Yeah, which is also difficult because with the team, I mean, there's signals for sure. I think you talked a little bit about that previous experience. Are they repeat founders? Do they have technical experience in this space? Why them out of anybody else? I'm sure those are some of the big ones you guys look for?
Yes, I think those are some of the big ones, like the repeat founder and all these sort of things. But yeah, I'll give you like one example of a company again without naming it, right?
Mhm,
But I saw it's funny. I saw this company and it had just raised. This is early in my investing career, like 2019 or something. It had just raised a seed round. Something about the value prop seemed compelling. I met the founder. It was too little, too late, sort of thing. They'd already raised seed round, whatever. They were in the travel space. COVID happens.
mhm,
Company like crashes, like precipitously crashes, and then COVID phases out and the company doesn't die though, and it starts kind of growing back. And at that point, I had built a relationship with the founder. I have a conversation with the founder. Founder's thinking about maybe, and this is what I mean about not the quote unquote not ambitious enough, right?
mhm,
Thinking about maybe raising $1 million, and it probably would have been like 1 on 15 or so. And I'm like, okay, at this point, I know the founder well enough. Like, I like this person. I think they're a solid founder. I liked the thesis before a lot. Then COVID happened. Maybe put some questions on it. But you know what? Now that COVID's phasing out, it still makes sense. But it was like, only raising one, not that much. How big could this get? Not that sure. Maybe 100 million. Do you know what I mean? Like, there wasn't a huge story of 100 million revenue. We're talking about $100 million exit value. Like, I'm like, okay. I just ended up passing. I just kind of let it go. I'm like, it's just not. It's just not. The story's not clear enough.
mhm.
But I like the team, right? And I still believe in the value. It's doing like $50 million run rate today, and profitable. And so, like, I don't know what it's worth because they just haven't raised any money in a long time because they haven't had to. And clearly, he's not the type of guy that specifically wants to go and raise fund after run around because,
Mm,
again, like you could tell even back then, it just wasn't where he was putting the emphasis on. But it's an absolute massive miss. So, like,
mm,
that's one. And then a different story, completely different. This one I can't share the names because I don't need to share it like as much, but it's a company called Rally Legal. So the founder, Scott, he had this company called Rally Legal. It was in the legal space. It was doing okay. It was growing linearly, and I would argue that the value wasn't like that clear, but something about him was different. And it's funny, like when I ended up passing, because I'm like, I just don't think it's a must have. And I was actually right about that. This is a different story, but I was right about that. I'll tell you why in a second. But he answered. So most founders, when you pass on them, most founders frankly say nothing. They're like, okay, cool, right? A handful of founders, it's called 20% of founders, will ask you, hey, cool, thanks for letting me know. Why did you pass?
mhm,
This person is to this date the only founder, and I've met many hundreds, who said to me, "Tell me why you passed. Here's like 7 reasons labeled A through whatever I like. A, it was because the team sucked. B is because the market's not big enough. C is because literally like that way. Tell me which one." And I'm like, I paused. I was like, man, that's so unique. That's so different. Like he's not just like going through the motions. Like he actually wants, and the team one was specifically interesting because you can never tell someone, like I pass for team all the time. I can't tell someone I'm passing for team. Like that's crazy, oh, you're just not good enough, or I don't think you're good enough, that's why I'm passing, which is just a crazy thing to say. I would never say it.
mhm,
But he having it as one of the reasons, and it wasn't the case in his case, so I didn't put that reason. But he's actually like trying to get people to say that if that's what they think. So he's trying to elicit like real, true feedback, and it just was different enough that it made me pause. Not obviously pause enough to invest, so I didn't. Anyways, AI happens. I was right. The value prop was weak. He pivots to what is now Spellbook, and now he's like, you see the revenue charts, and I don't have the revenue numbers, but they're just like insane. He went to the Valley for 2 weeks, got like 5 term sheets for a Series B not too long ago. So again, another massive miss because I just didn't pick up on the subtle signals. And the question for me is always like, what frameworks can I create that help me not miss out, like somehow not miss out on those? Because that cost me like 30x, 40x. I don't know what it is, but it cost a lot.
mhm. What's the like now you've been in the seat as a partner for 5 years. You've been both a founder, a venture investor. I think you've seen, I don't know how many, companies you've seen. You've obviously invested in several, and you've probably seen what, like over 400 or 500 thousand pitches.
Yeah, something like that. Let's say 1,000 plus.
Crazy. So I mean, given everything you know now, what's the biggest sort of piece of advice that you'd give both a founder and an investor? I'm kind of curious from both hats. So a founder pitching to you, like if you really had to, in terms of like that differentiator, really cracking through a lot of noise now, what is that as a pre-seed startup?
Well, so I like look, you have to somehow shine out on some dimension. I mean, I think that's what most VCs are looking for is someone who stands out on some dimension, someone that is hard to forget. That's the number one thing I think you got to do. And whatever that means, but I think it definitely means somehow finding a way to tell a story within your pitch versus just the classic, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the market, whatever. Like finding a story, finding a way to tell a pitch And
Mhm.
it depends on the stage what you're really trying to prove out. Like pre-seed, you're trying to prove that you're an absolute killer team and that there's just a really big opportunity, that there's maybe some sort of unique insight that you've discovered. I think at Series A, you're trying to prove those things plus that you have real product market fit. And that like numbers start to matter more. Not fully like numbers matter or growth matters that much, but there's got to be indicators that you have real pull, real product market fit that you can lean into. And seed is somewhere in between where you have to prove that you have like real value delivery, like the value prop is 100%. And within all that, I do think you have to find a way to tell a story. And then there's a lot of gamesmanship around fundraising. And it's one of the few parts. This is the other thing about product market fit. You can't fake product market fit. You can't game it. Like you have to actually get product market fit. You can game fundraising. There are people who could take a not so good idea and raise a lot of money. And there's some people who, with a very good idea, struggle to raise a lot of money. It's a gameable thing. And so that's the other part of it that you can optimize and drive FOMO and all these sort of things. And I think, for what it's worth, that is a skill set. Like I do think if you're in the game of venture, capital can be a weapon if used the right way. And so the people that are better at fundraising, they do have an extra like added resource on top of everything else. Now, if you don't get the product market fit, it's not going to matter. But if you do, it can help a lot.
What about on the venture side? Someone breaking into VC, or what makes a good investor now that you've been in that hot seat?
I think that's maybe a tougher one, but I think like it depends on the stage for sure. So talking about like the early stage, seed stage, like my focus is really more than anything on how to find great opportunities, like ultimately sourcing. Because at the end of the day, where does alpha come from? Like I'm a very strong believer that take your story about Gary Vee and Uber.
Hmm.
So the story usually is about something like Uber, and the story is like Mark Cuban missed on it, right? Or Gary Vee missed on it, and that is an interesting narrative. But the actual story, in my opinion, isn't so much that they missed on it, but that they saw it in the first place. Like out of thousands of investors across North America,
Why them?
maybe 30,
Mm.
yeah, maybe 30 saw the opportunity. And sure, maybe only 2 or 3 invested, or 5 invested, whatever it was. But those 30 are the 0.1% already. And if they're seeing Uber, then they're probably also seeing Airbnb. They're probably also seeing Stripe. They're probably also seeing a bunch of things. On one of those, they're going to pull the trigger, and that's all you need.
Hmm.
And so the game is, how do you put yourself in a position where whatever vertical or geo you're targeting, you're seeing the best deals. And yes, you want to pick as well as you can, but nobody has a crystal ball, so everybody's going to miss. There are people playing this game, and you hope to not be one of them, and you just don't really 100% know. But there are people playing this game who think they're playing the game, and they're not even playing the game because they're never even seeing those opportunities. So even if they're excellent pickers, your basket is already, 50th percentile and below. And in this game, that's just not going to get you there.
Love it. I know we're up on time. Last question for you. Well, one, I wanted to give a shout out on your favorite book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's one of my favorites as well. So I usually ask about a book, Rex. What I wanted to end on is 150 episodes. You've talked to a lot of this is more on the podcast. What's the most inspiring kind of episode that you've covered? I know it's tough. I'm sure there are many, but is there one that you point to that you're like, this is a must listen?
Yeah, there's a lot I think that are a must listen. I mean, a recent one, the Cluely one is just crazy. Like that's just a that's just a wild episode. I mean, I don't know if you follow the story of Roy Lee, but these guys like 21 or 22, got kicked out of Harvard, kicked out of Columbia because he started some cheating app, went crazy viral on Twitter, just raising $15 million from A16 Series A, and grew to like 0 to 5 million ARR in like 3 months, all because frankly he knows how to go viral on Twitter. So I think that's just it's just a wild episode. Like the guy is just so eccentric. In terms of one of the most compelling narratives, like I go back a lot of times to a good friend of mine, Marty from Block Through, who just he ultimately exited for about $100 million. Didn't raise much money, so he did really well. But it's not like a blockbuster exit. But it was just like, man, this guy, I've just known him so well. Like he's from Ottawa. When he was starting on one of his first businesses, we were starting on Gymtrack, so it was kind of the same timeline. And it was just like, honestly, punch to the face after punch to the face, failure after failure after failure. And I was there to see it all, like very close. And even this last one that ultimately worked, couldn't raise money, product launches failed, had to get rid of the CTO, switch a different one, like all these things for 2 or 3 years. And I think what he had more than the vast majority of founders that I know, certainly more than I do by far, is this guy just will not quit. Like he literally, and that's an interesting piece in and of itself, which is you really do raise your odds by just continuing to swing. Like whatever your probabilities of a win are, if you just somehow keep swinging, keep swinging, keep swinging. Which, to be clear, for example, I didn't. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not starting startups right now. And so my odds of getting a unicorn myself are zero. I might invest in one, but I certainly won't create one unless I switch what I do. And whereas if you just keep swinging, your odds are whatever they are. And he just wouldn't stop. Like, he literally just would not stop. And so, anyways, it's a really compelling story. And that one just, yeah, one I'll never forget.
Well, too many episodes to mention for sure. But for folks listening, certainly check out the Product Market Fit Show. Connect with Pablo on LinkedIn. He's a top voice, as I said. Posts a lot of great content, a lot of really cool stories too. I really think you're awesome at marketing, man. You really have a knack for it.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And
I
we
just,
have, for what it's worth,
yeah,
like, we have the classic, like, Mercury was on recently, Mercado Libre was on, Glean, Huntress. Like, there's a lot of the classic, like, $1 billion plus stories that are there. And I think what does make us different, what I do try to focus on, is just doing that 0 to 1, covering as much depth as possible, how they got off, because everything else obviously is important, but I do find it's covered elsewhere. And so what we try to do is just say, like, how go from 0 to 1? Like, what did they really do to get to that first million, 2 million, 3 million in ARR?
appreciate you. Thanks for being on the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me, man.